Hi everyone, welcome back to Learn with me. I'm Deborah Hanson. Today we're going to be looking at AP Human Geography 1.5 Human Environmental Interactions. I'm going to go through all the information you need to know to be successful on the exam. On the slide, you're going to see all the key terms that are important for 1.5, and I have a separate video also just for the key terms where I go through definition and how to apply them, like with a real life example, exam tip, things like that. You can find those on my channel as well, the videos for the key terms. But this actual video is going to be about the CED question, which we're going to talk about just in a minute. So before we get into the CED question, just want to thank everybody who's already liked and subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much. I love seeing the numbers go up. It's always really great to hear from you guys too in the comments or by email, whatever works. But again, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. I'm always happy to answer, and I do answer everyone. So the CED question for this section of the unit 1.5 is, explain how major geographic concepts illustrate spatial relationships. So we're going to go into all the essential knowledge you need to be able to answer this particular question, because we know the CED is really the basis of the AP exam. It's what the College Board uses to make your exams. So really important to know how to be able to answer all of these questions. So human environmental interaction is all about how people and the environment affect each other. It looks at all the ways humans depend on, adapt to, and modify their surroundings. So for example, think about irrigation systems built in the desert. That's people changing their environment to grow food in a place that otherwise would be too dry. There are three main ways geographers look at this interaction. First of all, depend. So humans rely on the environment for resources like water, food, and raw materials. Second, adapt. We adjust our lifestyles and technology to environmental conditions like building houses on stilts in flood-prone areas. And third, modify. We actively change the environment to meet needs such as building dams, clearing forests, or creating farmland. Here's a big AP tip. Anytime you see an example of humans interacting with their environment, always connect the environmental factor to a human response or impact. That link is what AP exam questions are really testing. So one of the key terms that was on the list was environmental determinism. And this is the idea that the physical environment directly shapes human culture and behavior. So in other words, things like climate, landforms, and resources decide what societies can do or can't do. So for example, ancient civilizations often developed near rivers because the fertile land made farming possible. That shows how the environment influenced where people lived and how they survived. This theory was once really important in geography, but today it's mostly rejected. Why? Because it's just too simplistic. It ignores human creativity, technology, and cultural differences. Here's a quick AP exam tip. Environmental determinism is often paired with possibilism on exams, so make sure that you can compare the two. Possibilism emphasizes human choices and innovation, while determinism emphasizes environmental limits. We're going to talk about in the next slide possibilism. So as I just said, we have to compare environmental determinism with possibilism. So let's look at what is possibilism. Possibilism is the idea that while the environment can present limits, humans have the ability to adjust and innovate to overcome those limits. So unlike environmental determinism, this perspective emphasizes human creativity, culture, and technology as powerful forces that shape societies. A great example is the Netherlands, where people reclaimed land from the sea using polders and dikes. Instead of being limited by flooding, they engineered a solution to expand their usable land. So modern geography favors possibilism because it acknowledges cultural and technological adaptation. It shows that humans aren't just shaped by their environment, but we can also shape the environment. So here's an AP tip. On the exam, look for examples where technology or cultural strategies are used to solve environmental challenges. That's a clear indicator of possibilism. So now let's talk about cultural ecology. This is the study of how human culture adapts to environmental conditions. It looks at how customs, traditions, and technology help people survive in different environments. For example, think about clothing styles. In tropical areas, people often wear light fabrics to stay cool in the heat. That's a cultural adaptation to the climate. The significance of cultural ecology is that it directly connects culture to environmental adaptation. It shows us that human practices, traditions, and innovations don't exist in isolation. They're shaped by the environment people live in. Here's your AP tip. When you see FRQs asking about human-environment relationships, especially in cultural practices, cultural ecology is a concept you're going to want to apply. So, sustainability is about using resources in a way that meets our needs today, but without taking away the ability of future generations to meet theirs. It's all about balance, balancing environmental health, economic growth, and social well being. A great example of this is Costa Rica's ecotourism. They preserve forests to protect the environment, but at the same time, ecotourism provides jobs and boosts the economy. That's sustainability in action, protecting resources while supporting people. The significance here is that sustainability is central to AP Human Geography when we talk about development and resource use. It's not just about growth, it's about responsible growth. Here's your AP tip. On the exam, pair sustainability with renewable resources. If a question asks about development or human environment interaction, linking sustainability with things like solar power or wind power or ecotourism will definitely strengthen your answer. Natural resources are the materials we get from nature that allow us to survive and thrive. These are the building blocks of human life and development. We divide them into two main categories, renewable and non-renewable. Renewable resources like solar energy can generate and won't run out as long as we use them wisely. Non-renewable resources like oil have a finite supply, which means once they're gone, they're gone. The significance here is huge. The type of resource a society relies on shapes its economy and its environmental policies. Countries with lots of oil, for example, may have economies built on fossil fuels, while countries that invest in renewable energy are building a more sustainable future. Here's your exam tip. Be ready to connect natural resources with sustainability. If a question asks about development, think about whether the resources being used are renewable or non-renewable and how that impacts future generations. Before we get to resource depletion, I just want to say if you want to see the full slideshow workbook and all the study notes that go along with all these videos, there's a link below in the description that might help you to be able to take your notes better, whatever you need to study for the AP exam or the unit exam. So let's talk about resource depletion. Resource depletion happens when we use natural resources faster than they can be replaced. This creates big problems like scarcity, environmental damage, and even economic instability. A clear example is overfishing. When fish are caught faster than they can reproduce, populations collapse and entire ecosystems are disrupted. The significance is that resource depletion highlights one of humanity's toughest challenges, balancing our needs with the limits of the environment. If we push too far, we risk damaging the system we depend on to survive. Here's your exam tip. Always connect resource depletion with population growth and rising consumption. The more people consume, the faster resources are used up, and the harder it becomes to keep development sustainable. So now we're going to talk about renewable resources. A renewable resource is a natural resource that can be replaced or regenerated quickly by nature. That means that we can keep using it without it running out, as long as we don't use it faster than it can be renewed. These resources are especially important for sustainability because they help us meet our needs without permanently damaging the environment. So here's some examples. We'll start with solar energy. Solar panels capture sunlight and turn it into electricity or heat. It's clean, renewable, and helps reduce pollution. Second, wind energy. Wind turbines use the wind's motion to spin the blades and generate electricity. It's efficient and it doesn't release harmful gases. Hydroelectric energy. Flowing or falling water, like from rivers or dams, spin turbines to create electricity. It's powerful and widely used as a renewable resource. Geothermal energy. This comes from inside the earth. Steam from the underground can be used to spin turbines and generate power or heat buildings directly. It's very cool. Biomass energy. Biomass comes from plants, wood, or waste. It can be burned for heat or made into fuels like ethanol and biodiesel for electricity and transport. And of course, forests and crops. They can also count as renewable resources since they can regenerate if we manage them responsibly. The big takeaway here is that renewable resources give us cleaner, more sustainable ways to meet our energy and resource needs, but we need to remember the key is balance. If we use them too quickly, even renewable resources can become depleted. Okay, so now we know about renewable resources, but now we also have to know about non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources are natural resources that cannot be replaced quickly once they're used up. They can take millions of years to form, which means once they're gone, they're essentially gone for good. For example, these examples include coal or oil, natural gas, metals like copper or uranium. Because they're limited and can also cause pollution, humans need to really use them carefully. There are several types of non-renewable resources. The first is fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. These come from the remains of ancient plants and animals that have been buried for millions of years. Fossil fuels provide a lot of energy, but burning them releases a lot of air pollution and contributes to climate change through greenhouse gases. Another type is nuclear energy, which is produced by splitting atoms, usually uranium, to release heat and generate electricity. Nuclear power produces a lot of energy, but it also comes with risks, such as radioactive waste storage and potential safety hazards. We also use minerals that are non-living natural substances found in the earth, like iron, copper, gold. These are critical for things like building, electronics, and tools. Since they take millions of years to form, they can run out. So we need to mine them carefully, and recycling is also super important. Finally, we often think of water as renewable. In some places, it can act as a non-renewable resource. Freshwater supplies can be limited, especially in dry regions. If water is overused or polluted, it can be very hard to replace. So overall, non-renewable resources are extremely important to modern life, but they come with serious challenges. On the exam, remember to connect this concept to sustainability and think about how human reliance on these resources impacts the environment and future generations. So now we're going to look at land use patterns. Land use patterns describe the way humans use lands for things like farming, housing, industry, and recreation. These patterns aren't random. They reflect a mixture of cultural values, economic needs, and environmental limits. So for example, think about urban sprawl, where farmland is converted into residential neighborhoods. This shows how people reshape the land to meet housing demands, but it also impacts the environment and food production. The significance of land use patterns is that they reveal human modifications of the environment. In other words, they show how people change the land to fit their needs. So for the exam, remember this. Land use patterns often show up in questions that link economic activity to environmental change. So if you see a prompt about cities, agriculture, or industry, land use patterns are probably an important part of your answer. Okay, so now we're going to talk about two major environmental issues, deforestation and desertification. We'll start with deforestation. This is the large-scale removal of forest for human use. They use it for farming, ranching, or logging. Sorry, I almost said lodging there. Logging. This reduces biodiversity, disrupts water cycles, and contributes to climate change. A good example of this is the Amazon rainforest, where they are clearing huge amounts of land for cattle ranching and soybean farming. The significance here is global. Deforestation affects trade, agriculture, and environmental policy. On the AP exam, it'll often appear alongside biodiversity loss and carbon emissions. Now let's move on to desertification. It's a different problem, but it is a related problem. It happens when land in arid or semi-arid regions degrades, often because of poor farming practices, overuse, deforestation, or climate change. This leads to soil loss and declining crop yields. The Sahel region in Africa is a clear example of this, where land degradation threatens food security and livelihoods. So for the exam, desertification is commonly linked to sustainability questions about agriculture and human survival. So while deforestation is about forests being cut down and their global impact, desertification is about land turning barren and its effect on farming and food productions. Both highlight the tension between human needs and environmental limits. Urbanization refers to the growth of cities and the movement of people from rural areas into urban ones. This usually happens because cities provide economic opportunities such as jobs, services, and better infrastructure. But while urbanization can drive development, it can also bring challenges. Rapid city growth can strain resources, increase pollution, and put pressure on land use and housing. A good example is Lagos in Nigeria, which has seen massive urban growth in recent decades. This growth affects everything from traffic congestion to housing shortages and environmental quality. For the exam, remember that urbanization is directly tied to human impacts on land and the environment. So watch out for these questions that link like city growth with issues like land use, sustainability, or population distribution. So when we talk about global environmental concerns, there are four key issues we focus on. We talk about first about climate change and pollution. Climate change refers to this long-term shift in temperature and weather, which is caused by natural processes, but also more significantly today, human activity like burning fossil fuels. Next, pollution. This is the contamination of air, water, and soil, and it can come from industrial waste, cars, plastics, and again, than human activity. We also look at conservation and preservation. Conservation means responsibly managing those resources to prevent overuse. So this looks like sustainable forestry, fishing quotas, or water management. And finally, preservation. It goes one step further by protecting environments from any human alteration, such as setting aside national parks or wildlife reserves. And all of these issues are significant because they tie into global sustainability, our ability to meet today's needs without harming future generations. So for the exam, make sure you can provide both a clear definition and real world examples for all of these concerns. So we know humans are deeply connected to the environment, and our actions can both help and harm the planet. On a positive side, we've used natural resources like oil, gas, and minerals to create technology that improves health, comfort, and living standards. But there are also major negative consequences. Overusing these resources can lead to pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change. We can also see these effects clearly in specific processes. Deforestation removes large areas of forests for human use, which reduces biodiversity and contributes to global warming. Desertification occurs in arid regions when poor farming practices and overuse of land degrades the soil, threatening food security. Urbanization, the rapid growth of cities, offers economic opportunities, but it also strains land, water, and air resources. These challenges connect to bigger global environmental concerns such as climate change, pollution, and the need for conservation and preservation. Together, they show why sustainability is important. So what can we do? We need to use resources wisely, reduce waste, and adopt sustainable practices that balance human needs with the health of our environment. So for the exam, remember to know both definitions and real-world examples, since these concepts often show up in questions about human-environment interaction and global sustainability. Okay, so that's the essential knowledge that goes with CED question, explain how major geographic concepts illustrate spatial relationships. And that is for 1.5 human environmental interactions. So everything you need to know to be able to answer that question is in this video. If you want to see the key terms from the list that we saw in the beginning, that's on a separate video. And if you want the full slideshow, workbook, notes that go along with all these videos, check the link below. And if you haven't had a chance to like and subscribe yet, please do so for me. And if you have any questions, of course, leave them below. I answer everyone. Thank you so much for listening today. See you next time.